Hi guys, and welcome to this episode of Fireside Chat. I'm Danielle and I'm your host. So today, guys, I am super excited because this is a topic that I've been thinking about for actually kind of a long time. Maybe like 14 years.
All right, then, keep your secrets.
Long before there was a Fireside Chat podcast. Today, I am going to be talking to you guys about coaching your own children. I've had the ups, I've had the downs, I've had the people who have said you should not do this. I've taken the seasons where I haven't, and then I've turned back around and said that I missed it, and taken the seasons that I have. And so today, we're going to go over that. So first off, guys, if you have never listened to the Fireside Chat podcast, my name is Danielle. I'm one of the owners of Next Generation Gym Owners, as well as one of the owners of Twister Sports here in Warrensburg, Missouri. I've owned a gym for the last 14 years in a teeny tiny town of 20,000 people. In fact, my town is so small that in 2017 and 2018, I was the mayor.
Thank you, New York.
If you are located in a small town and you think, this is the most my gym will ever do, this is the biggest it will ever get with 70 or 80 kids in it, and I am excited with where I'm at, here's the deal. I want you to be happy with where you're at, but I also don't want you to settle, because I know that small towns can be some of the very best places to have amazing gyms. You can have the best community support and you can really grow your gym despite the size of the town itself. So I'm actually going to be teaching a class on that at our Dallas Summer Conference, June 20th through 22nd. I keep saying Dallas, but truly it is located in Arlington, Texas, which is just right outside of Dallas. Beautiful venue. Guys, make sure you go get registered because we have some amazing classes. And how to make it in a small town is one of the classes that I am super excited to be teaching. So that conference is available for purchase just a little bit longer though, okay, because it is in June. So it is available at ngconferences.com. Make sure you click on it, go get registered, get your hotel because it's going to sell out. Okay, guys, so let's get started. It has been a crazy busy couple of weeks, and I'm sure that I'm not the only one. In fact, I kind of know I'm not the only one because I have so many of our Academy members who have reached out talking to me about tryouts, choreography already, and just kind of getting themselves prepared for what's to come in the new season. And I feel like it was like 2 weeks ago that we were talking about end of season banquets, and maybe a week before that we were still kind of talking about our end of season events. And it just is such a crazy moment in the season. But do you know what's funny? I could probably refilm this whole beginning of the podcast and replay up to this point with the exception of a couple of different events. And I could replay this in September or October, and you guys would all nod your heads and say, man, yeah, it's such a crazy part of the season. And so if you're feeling crazy right now, it shouldn't be like this 100% of the time. It shouldn't be like this forever. So if you find yourself in that moment where you feel like it is crazy all the time, or you're listening to this 3 months after it releases and you're like, yeah, life is just so crazy. Like, know that there should be the ebb and the flow, but it shouldn't be crazy 100% of the time, because either you have some inefficiencies in your gym or you're like into the suffering.
You see, you are the problem.
Like, you enjoy it and you have, whether you mean to or not, you've got something in the back of your mind that like craves more chaos. So speaking of craving chaos, have you guys ever coached your own children?
Are you serious?
Out of our 4 children, 3 of them have done cheer. All 3 have done hip hop at one point in our gym. 3 of the 4 have tumbled, and I have coached all of them in tumbling and cheer. And I've always been pretty embedded into our hip hop program. So though I have never coached my own team within that program, I have always stepped in and done cleanup and given feedback on choreography and all of that. And so I have a lot of experience in coaching kids, but not only that, you guys, I have a lot of experience in coaching my own children. Now, let me tell you about our family, because those of you who are even really close to us may not realize that Justin and I have a blended family.
Amongst children of blended families.
We've been married for 13 years, together for 15. My only, technically, is 15. She was just like 3 or 4 months old when we met. He has 3 children who today are, of course, much older, but at the time when we met, they were 3, 5, and 8. And so we've like had our kids together growing up for 15 years now. And as we have done that, we opened the gym we're in season 14 now. So we opened it, long ago. So I have this unique experience of not only coaching my own children, but coaching stepchildren. So if you guys are listening to this and you're like, first of all, if you're not a parent, you probably have coaches in your gym who are. And so it's still a really important topic, especially if you're a gym owner, because you need to know what it's like for them. Secondly, if you have not coached your own children before, let's talk about it a little bit. So coaching your own children is one of the most personal things that you will probably ever do, because you take your home life and your work life, and as if they weren't already incredibly integrated because you own the gym, you are now going to take your family and directly integrate them into your job. And it can be a deeply personal thing. When things are going well, it feels great and there's not an issue. But as soon as something negative happens, either at the gym or at home, it can be incredibly stressful. At the same time, I am here to tell you it can be done in most families, I think. It can be done well. It can be done with boundaries. And it can be one of the most rewarding things that you ever do. So let's talk first about what makes coaching your own child so hard. There's definitely a blurred line between parent and coach at times. And I can be the first to tell you that if I see my child kind of being lazy, not giving 100%, kind of giving an attitude to her teammates, it's really hard to maintain the same role with her as a coach as I would with any other athlete that I see the same behaviors from. I think there are parents in a gym who may initially, once they get close to you and they know.
Hey, if you know, you know.
I do think there are parents who initially think, you're probably much easier on your own child. Like, you probably cut them so much slack, you favor them, and all of this. But anybody who has watched a coach their own child for a period of time knows that it is hard, because I think we're often so much harder on our own kids. Those rose-colored glasses really look different when you're like, I know what my child is capable of, and I'm not seeing it in this practice or in last practice, or I haven't seen it in a month, right? And I think when you have the coach's eyes on, a lot of times you're like, I fully know what my child is capable of. Whereas a parent who doesn't have any experience in cheer is like, man, she did her back handspring. That's great. But a coach is going to say, she kind of has her back handspring. It's a little froggy. Her arms aren't fully locked. She's not really blocking. Like, it's not even the length of like half a panel. Like, she kind of has it. Right. And so I think that a lot of times as coaches, we are way harder on our own kids. I can actually give you an example, and I know that sometimes she listens to this. We have a parent in the gym who coaches at the local university, and her daughter is on our level 2 and 3 team this year. I was actually just watching a video. One of the parents recorded some videos so that the others who weren't at practice could kind of see the stunt progressions we've made in just 2 practices this season. It's really like remarkable. And in the background of one, I could hear that parent say, come on, you got it. Because she knows that her daughter has that skill. She knows what the skill needs to look like. She knows how to execute the skill. And so being a parent on the sidelines that isn't coaching your own child can be equally as hard sometimes, right? Because that parent knows what things should look like versus another parent who, like, you do a full around a lib and you're like, wow, my daughter did that. Forget that a lib was droopy and the arms were floppy and, the bases didn't get it all the way to prep the first time and stuff like that. Like, a parent who knows how to coach and who knows the skills is always going to be so much harder on their own child than a parent who doesn't, because we have a different level of expectation because we know what the skill should look like. So I've kind of had both ends of the experience on this. I've had, of my 3 children myself that I've coached, I've had the one that is like, okay, I understand why you're always hard on me because you know that I'm capable of this and that. I've also had the one that's like, okay, but everybody else is talking and you're telling me to stop talking, right? And so your kids, as a coach, they can sometimes be resentful of the fact that you hone in a little bit more on the behaviors that they are doing. And I think when your kids are at certain ages, it's even more challenging. So for me, I've always said it's like the tinies and the teenagers, right? For me, that was when our kids had those moments when they were perhaps the most defiant or testing boundaries. They were tinies and teenagers. When they have that like sassy talk or they're talking back, those tend to be the 2 age groups that I saw it the most. And it can be really challenging as a coach to figure out like, what are those boundaries and at what moment am I supposed to be a parent versus a coach? Because with so many other children, if they were to speak to me as a coach a certain way, or I hear them talk to their teammates a certain way, I may take that athlete and go talk to the parent and say, hey, I need to have this conversation so that you can address this. And also me as a coach that I have addressed it. And when you are both the coach and the parent, that can be really challenging because your kid kind of thinks you're harping on them a whole lot extra when really you're like, hold on, there's this coaching side and there's the parent side that I have to have this conversation with you about.
Perfectly balanced, as all things should be.
The emotional stakes of coaching your own kids can actually be a lot deeper too, right? The wins are even more exciting because you don't just leave and like your life kind of switches back over to your family. Like as a coach who doesn't have children in the program, you know, maybe you are leaving a competition and you're like, man, that was awesome. And in the 10 or 15 minute drive home, like you've kind of calmed down, you get home and you're excited and you tell your family, but like, if they don't get it, you kind of just move on with it, right? Like you move on with life. And it's different when you coach your own children because that win really continues through the car ride home a lot more. And you feel it just as much when it's a loss. So not even the loss of a competition, but like, man, having a bad practice feels so much worse if your kid was part of it or if they also are leaving feeling that way. If you're a coach who's ever had your own child have a mental block, one of my kids did, and she struggled with it for about 6 months. And it wasn't, you know, she had competed the skill tons and tons of times. I don't even know if I would necessarily consider it a mental block. It was the fear of tumbling in a certain direction because it wasn't the 54 feet of the floor, it was the 42 feet. And it was a pass that she's a long tumbler. She probably needed more space than that. It was just how it was choreographed. And she would consistently bail on this pass and then turn around and look at the edge of the floor. And as both a parent and a coach, it was incredibly frustrating at times. She would leave practice feeling really frustrated, and I would leave feeling like, well, I don't know. I'm also frustrated. She had space. She had enough opportunity to land it. She was the only one to bail the pass in that moment, you know, and turn around and look at the edge of the floor. Those of you thinking mental blocks right now, like I said, I don't really know if it was. I know it was a legitimate fear and it was a skill that she could definitely hit. So then to put her in that position, you know, probably splitting hairs to talk about if it was a mental block or not. But realistically, it was such a frustrating season to watch her bail on passes and then have to leave and say, oh, let's go home and eat dinner. So how was practice, right? Like you can't go home and do that and have that conversation because I know darn well how practice was. It was terrible and you left feeling terrible and your coach was frustrated and your teammates were frustrated. And so it's almost like the kids don't get to escape. Even if you're the parent who's really good at like flipping the switch, your kids don't get to escape. And that is really hard. And it's a lot of pressure on the athletes. I've also had my kids, and I would say it was more with our boy, but like when he cheered, that maybe they would have a really bad practice and he'd come home and he'd like say, yeah, practice was awful. And then he'd shake it off. But like I coached him, I couldn't shake it off quite that fast. Like within 4 or 5 minutes, he had like moved on to something else. And like he was totally normal and totally fine. And I needed another like 30 minutes to just go walk away and like decompress after that practice.
I need some air.
It's been hard over the years because having different children with different personalities and coaching each of them, some of them, they dwell. You know, my youngest, like if she's bailing on a pass at practice, like she will dwell on it and it kind of ruins the rest of the night. Our oldest who cheered, you know, he would say, yeah, practice really sucked, and he'd move on. And like I was kind of left to be like, okay, now I need time because I'm frustrated. And so you have this different dynamic of like when you're coaching your own kids and something bad happens or something good happens, you're not maybe both going to be over it at the same time, but yet you've gone home. And so that can be really hard. I've also run into, you know, as we're talking about the most negative and challenging parts of coaching your own kids, when my youngest, I'll call her Addie because that's her name. But when Addie was little, she was on, I think, a mini team, and her sister's team won grand champions at a competition, and they got these like headphones because it was a rock star event. And so that was like their theme. They got these like cool white headphones. As one of the coaches on that team, I got a pair of headphones, and so it was extra. And we're up in the stands, and this is like a 12-hour day. And my youngest is sitting there on the iPad, and I was like, hey, I got these headphones now. And so I hand them to her. She puts them on. I plug them in. And wouldn't you know it, within a couple of hours, I have 4 or 5 parents on her team who are mad at me because none of the other kids on the team got those headphones. Why would Addie get those headphones? So I will tell you today, if something like that were to happen, I would be a little bit baffled. But the culture in my gym wasn't super great back then. It was a culture of everyone fighting for spots and not being proud of kids, whether they're your own or someone else's, for accomplishing things. So it didn't have that like gyms always say we're a family. Well, are you? Because if you're jealous of somebody else's kid, that's not family, right? That's not that positive, encouraging culture that you're acting like a family. Maybe a family that has issues, but not like a positive, exciting family. And so back then, that was a really big challenge because I was like, well, I don't know what the right answer is. I have an extra pair of headphones and my 7 or 8-year-old is here for the entire day and your kid's here for a couple of hours. Like, can my kid just wear the headphones? What's the big deal? But to those parents, it was the owner's kid was getting something special. And so I think that can also be a big challenge because, you know, people are looking at the owner's kid, and a lot of times there is an element of either jealousy or misunderstanding or feeling like the owner's kid is maybe getting some sort of preferential or special treatment. It's pretty common for owners' kids to be flyers. Why is that? Not because we're giving them special treatment, but because they probably started at the youngest age of anybody in that gym, right? Before there was a bottom age on tinies, which let's not like get into why there's a bottom age on tinies, but not on minis. Like we won't get into that. But before there was a bottom age on tinies way back in the day, I started my daughter on it at 2 years old. Now, I'm telling you, tinies and teenagers, they press the boundaries. And so that 2-year-old was the only tiny I've ever kicked off a team. But she came back at 3. And she was a darn good tiny at 3 years old. But how many other kids, by the time she was mini or youth, you know, and she was 7, 8, 9, like how many other kids already had 4 years of cheer experience or 4.5 at that point? How many kids had tumbled since they were 18 months? How many kids lived at the gym? And so as she was growing, I saw these parents, and they did it with my other kids too. But of course, my other kids were just a little bit older when we started the gym. But I would see these people develop this element of like it was unjust. And my business partner, her daughter flew too. Her daughter is like a year older than mine. And so they both grew up in the gym together. And so this idea of like, well, the owner's kids are flyers. Well, the owner's kids got that tumbling pass. Well, the owner's kids are in jumps. The owner's kids are in dance. Like, no, it has nothing to do with the fact that they were owner's kids. It has everything to do with the fact that they invested all this time into the gym since they were little tiny kids. And this is, you know, this is really the only sport my daughter's ever played until recently. We lived our life at the gym until she was a freshman in high school and decided I might pick up soccer also. And so in those moments, like she wasn't double sporting it or doing dance also or like these other activities outside of the gym. And so she did get very good at those skills. Those are the things that other parents don't usually see.
Grass, it's always greener on the other side.
On the flip side of that, I think it's easy to say there's a lot parents don't see. So as a gym owner, my kids were always the ones to get the practice wear that maybe had some stitches missing and wasn't perfect. The rhinestones messed up on a uniform or on a t-shirt. Guess whose kids got those? The company ran out of medals and we were short one medal. Guess whose kid didn't get a medal that year? The wrong sizes. Maybe we made a mistake and ordered the wrong sizes, or a parent came back and said, well, this doesn't fit. And I understand it's the size we ordered, but this doesn't fit. And so before I had those systems and policies in place, what happened? I would swap with one of my kids' uniforms. And so my kids always got the shaft, to be honest. They always got the downside of things. Now on the upside, they could go to the clinics, they could do the private lessons. So there were benefits for sure. But I would say when they were younger and we were a new gym and didn't have a lot of procedures in place and didn't have a lot of systems, they got the downside way more than they ever got the upside. You know, no one sees those things. And so being the owner's kid can be really hard. So I realized that, you know, this podcast is about coaching your own kids, but realistically, being the owner's kid in any facet can be really challenging. And if you're a key component, you're a coach, but you're a key component of that gym, your kids probably feel it too. So all of this, right? I've been talking this whole time about all of the challenges in coaching your own children, but then why would anybody do it? If it's that hard and there are so many potential downsides that your kids can be resentful and that, you know, you leave a practice that's really terrible and it's kind of silence and awkward in the car because you're like, well, I know it was terrible and I know exactly why, because you didn't pull your tuck. Like all of those things, why the heck would we ever coach our kids?
Why?
So I can tell you, when we started our gym, we didn't have a choice. Like I was the coach, you know, before we moved into our physical gym and we were operating 3 teams out of a community center, I was the coach. That's why I coached my kids, because if I didn't coach them, nobody was coaching them. And as they grew, like I said, they were in the gym a lot. And so they leveled up a little bit faster. And so why did I coach my own kids? Because I was the only one who could coach that level at the time. As we got a little farther along, why did I coach my kids? Well, over time, it was because I really enjoyed it. Whether your kids are growing up, and I think this is the case with Dan now, if you listen to the Cheer Biz podcast, I believe he's at a point where his daughter is now kind of at the age and level, pretty close at least, to where he coaches. Maybe that's the team that you've always coached. You've always coached your level 4, and all of a sudden one of your kids, they're ready for level 4. Well, maybe you're not going to stop coaching just because your kid's on the team. And so whatever the reason is, it can go really well or it can be very painful. And it's not always up to you, because teenagers are terrifying sometimes. They're wonderful people when they're happy, but it's not always up to you, but it's definitely between you and your child, and it can be successful, or it can be something that you're like, this is the one time I will ever do this, and we'll have to come up with a new plan for next season.
You tripping, bro. You tripping.
So let me tell you about the wonderful side of things. You do get a front row seat to your child's growth. And that's pretty exciting. You know, you took the first steps with them when they were little, and that was a huge memory. I remember Megan, our middle child, she's like grown up and in the Air Force now. I remember when Megan got her back handspring for the first time. Like, I remember when Connor did his first toss to hands and caught a co-ed stunt. I remember when Addie did her first back bend kickover. Like, I pulled my phone out and I made her do a video for her grandma where she's like, "Hi, Mimi." And she did the back bend kickover. Like, I had a front seat to all of those moments. I was never really missing them because I was always there to coach them, right? And so even if they were practicing at home and they got the skill, I was there to see it. If they were at the gym and they got the skill, I was there to see it. And so that was such a rewarding moment. I will tell you, probably my biggest reward in all of this time coaching is to have my own child. So let me tell you about a couple seasons ago. And it was right after COVID, so things were just, they're just there. We had several teams. My daughter, it was the 1 year she was eligible to be both on a youth team and a senior team. That year, I can't remember all the levels, but we had for sure a youth 2, a senior 2, and a senior 3. When she was placed on teams, she was placed on the senior 2 and the senior 3. We felt like that was going to be the best fit for her. So she was on the senior 2 and the senior 3, though she was age eligible for a youth team. Well, we get a couple of months into the season and somebody quits on one team and somebody joins the other team. And I'm now in this position where I really need a tumbler on youth 2. I need a kid with really good, strong handsprings. And on senior 2, where she was filling in as a flyer, wasn't her primary team to fly because she had been flying on senior 3. And so she was just kind of there filling in whatever spot they needed her on senior 2. I now had plenty of handsprings, and I actually had somebody else who could fly those positions. I've never done this in all these years of cheer, but I make the decision that I am going to pull her from senior 2 to youth 2 because youth 2 needs her a whole lot more. And she's got a couple of friends on there, but it was definitely the art of persuasion that night. I went to talk to her. I went up to her room and I'm like, so here's the deal. It's working out fine on senior 2, but youth 2 is kind of a mess right now. I could really use you on that team. And, and your friends are Skylar's on there, Vivian and Avery, all your friends are on there. And so I sell her on it and we get a couple of weeks. So I switch her. We get a couple of weeks into the new teams where she's on a youth 2 and a senior 3. And she tells me that she's a little bit frustrated that, cause she is the oldest kid on the youth 2. She tells me she's a little bit frustrated. And at that point, I'm like, well, I can't switch you back. And so you're just going to kind of have to deal with it. So situation number 1, I've never moved a kid from a senior 2 to a youth 2. I've never actually, maybe since the first season that we had cheer and I was listening to ASGA and a whole lot of bad advice. I don't think I've ever since then moved a kid from one team to another team. And especially think of how any other parent in your gym would lose their mind if you moved a kid from a senior team to a youth team. I did it because it was my child and I knew that they could use her. Well, then problem number 2, she's not really super enjoying it the way I had sold her on enjoying it. And my answer was, sorry for you. We have to do this now. Okay, that's problem number 2. Anyway, we get through this season and a couple of years later, I ask her something and I'm like, so what was your favorite team that you were ever on? And what does she tell me? It was that youth 2. She's like, it was really hard at first and I had to adapt to it, but that was my favorite team I was ever on. And I think back and I'm like, that was one of the years that I hadn't coached her in a couple of years. And I had been coaching that youth 2 and that senior 2. And I pulled her over and I coached the youth 2. And I'm like, I took that as a personal compliment, you guys. I'm like, this could have been such a terrible situation for her. And she could have said it was the worst experience she ever had in cheer. But that is my greatest joy, having my kid tell me that was her favorite team she's ever been on was a team I coached and a team that would have been a really big challenge for anybody else to move to.
This little part is called happiness.
So as your child grows up, I would say one of the other really big joys for me, a lot of coaches' kids who have grown up in the gym like that really do turn into great coaches one day. And she's 15 now and she coached Mini 1 with me last year. And as the year kind of ended, I said, do you want to coach again next year and blah, blah, blah. And as I am laying out the teams, she comes in, she looks at the board and she's like, well, what team do you have me coaching? I tell her youth 1 and she's like, well, and so you're coaching youth 1 too? And I'm like, no. And she goes, well, I'm going to coach with you again. I'm like, oh, this is so cool. And she's not like a 15-year-old who actually likes to hang out with me. So take these as really exciting moments and things that if you're coaching your own kids, one day you might experience something like that. And it's very heartwarming. You have that front row seat to all of the things that your child is experiencing, from the warm-up rooms to the practices and the things that most people don't get to see behind the scenes. You understand when they struggled with a stunt or struggled with tumbling, how exciting it was when they actually did it and they were successful with it. And so it's really cool as a coach to be able to see that, but so much cooler when you get to see it and you're also their parent. You're kind of like building a legacy together. Even now, Megan, who is 18 for now, she lives in Las Vegas. She's in the Air Force. Even now, she's like, called a couple weeks ago and she's like, so I heard some of these team names. Tell me these team names. Where did you come up with them? And so you have this like inside bond that's all about cheerleading. And it's such a cool experience because your kids are still interested. So let me give you a couple of quick tips of things that have worked for us over the years, because there's a lot that hasn't worked. And so if you're me 10 years ago, I would have loved these tips. So first, I think it's valuable to be able to tell your kids when you're being a coach and when you're being a parent. And as they grow up and they get to that level where they can say it respectfully, you have to also accept that there are times that they may say to you, Mom, you're coaching me right now, but I just want you to be my parent. I find that now that my daughter, she probably when she was about 12 or 13, she was able to start respectfully saying, okay, Mom, we're at home. And I was just telling you about this, but like, I don't want you to coach me right now. And so I do think being able to have that boundary and that mutual respect for one another is really valuable, especially because if you've coached for a long time and you coach a lot, you probably put on the coach's brain more often than you actually mean to. You know, I can go to any sporting event out there and I can probably find something that like physically I could coach those athletes on, even if I know nothing about the sport. You know, they're doing squats wrong, they're doing lunges, like whatever it is that I could probably fix in a sport. And so if you've coached long enough, you're going to put on the coach's brain more often than you actually mean to. Number 2, set the boundaries and set them clearly. Know your child and what they can handle. You know, when my daughter was really young, there's no way she could have handled the knowledge that she has now because she was just too little. Now, we never hid the business conversations from her. We never hid like, oh, we're just not going to talk about those when the kids are around. Like, we just didn't do that. But I will also tell you like a little funny story of she was friends with this other tiny and they used to hang out at the gym while this tiny's older sister was in practice. And I remember it was this little girl named Lexi, and Addie and Lexi would just play. And one time Lexi said, I want Skittles, but my mom won't give me any money for Skittles. And Addie goes, oh, come with me. I know where my mom keeps the money, and starts walking to the office. And like, that was obviously a moment when you know, okay, my child needs pretty clear boundaries because she's too young. She doesn't get it. Versus today, where I have this giant whiteboard in my living room. She basically knows who is on what teams, who's coaching what teams, what levels I'm thinking. And this year when I had to go do a whole refresh and wipe out the board and try it again, like she knew what I was thinking. And she also knew, don't you dare say a word to anybody else because that is private information. Right? And so we had to learn like what age could she handle that information, you know, and there's a couple moments like her best friend has seen the uniform because her best friend who cheers with her came over while she was trying on our brand new uniform that nobody else has seen. There are some boundaries that extend beyond her to her friends. When she was probably 7 or 8, probably 8, I got a call at Target and it was a coach actually quitting. And I was shopping at Target with my daughter. And it was actually her favorite coach. It was kind of an eye-opening moment to say, can my child handle this boundary right now? Because she can hear the call that's going on because I wasn't expecting that was going to be the call. So it was like my phone was loud. I like had my daughter right next to me and she could hear the conversation. I wasn't expecting it. So it was a good moment to say, can she handle that boundary right now? Because, well, she found out and I don't want anybody else finding out until I'm ready to tell them. Can your child handle you being a coach during practice, right? Like, I don't make my daughter call me Coach Danielle. I think that would be strange. She definitely calls me mom, but at the same time, she also knows that we don't do inside jokes. Like our family has a lot of inside jokes. We don't do those during practice because we don't want to exclude anybody else. And so we have those boundaries. You have to know between your kids, can you handle it? Can your child handle it? That division between coach and parent? And will it be something that enhances your relationship or ruins it? And I think there are moments that it does a little bit of both. But if it ruins it a little, can you move past it to a point where you're continuously growing and growing in a positive direction? I do want to encourage you, give your kids grace. If you coach them, give them grace. Don't stress too much when they talk back to you in front of the parents in the gym. You know, the more parents get to know you and your own children, they will understand that your kids live at the gym and they're pretty comfortable with the gym. And so they're not out in public talking back to you. They're kind of sitting in their living room talking to you. It just so happens that their living room is the lobby at the gym. Don't stress too much about it, right? Because a good culture, parents will start to learn what you stand for as an owner and as a parent. They'll start to give a whole lot more grace. And as they give you grace, give it to your kids as well. All right, guys. Well, thank you for joining me on this episode of Fireside Chat. I release new episodes on YouTube every Monday and episodes on Spotify and Apple Podcasts every Thursday. So make sure you guys check out the previous episodes. There are tons in there now. I think we're over 3,500 downloads since the first of the year, which is pretty darn good because we used to be only on Facebook Live within the groups. So that is pretty cool. All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining on this episode, and I will see you guys next week.